Hi, and welcome to this live reading from Killer Smile by Allan Evans, and this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Chapter 1, Wednesday. It was September in Minnesota. The humidity had subsided while the warm weather lingered. The mosquitoes had gone to wherever mosquitoes go when they're not biting. Kids were back in school, life was good, yet Cade's nagging feeling lingered. Something was in the air. In his line of work, those feelings could be the difference between life and death. Sure, the tingle on the back of his neck could be nothing more than nerves or likely too much coffee, but they could also mean survival. He supposed the feeling had something to do with the mysterious meeting he'd been summoned to join at the University of Minnesota. Mysterious only because he didn't know the people he was meeting or why they'd asked for him. Curiosity, as much as anything, brought him to the massive campus this autumn evening. Cade dropped his truck behind the Walter Library, tossing a State Patrol official vehicle card into the dashboard. No point in risking a tow on the parking-challenged university campus. The sun had gone down over an hour ago, and the breeze had picked up, rippling Cade's windbreaker. He passed a group of students logged into a passionate debate. One of them argued that all first-year students should be taught meditation to reduce stress on campus. The other earnestly countered that that's what beer was for. As he moved over to give them room on the sidewalk, Cade got a nod from the beer guy and a look of panic from one of the girls who noticed his weapon. "It's all right," he said as he pulled his jacket back over his holster. "I'm a cop." Working for the Minnesota State Patrol, Cade Dawkins was one of two full-time plainclothes investigators out of the East Metro Division in the Twin Cities. The 31-year-old had already spent 9 years in law enforcement and was a recent transplant, having previously been with the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, better known statewide as the BCA. At the patrol, he'd made his reputation with a once-in-a-lifetime case. "He doesn't look like any cop I've seen," one of the young women behind him whispered loud enough for him to hear. "He looks like he should be working at Starbucks, if you ask me." "Amber, you're so bad. Baristas don't carry guns." "They should. I'd tip them better if they did." Cade turned around at this and caught the young woman glancing back and couldn't help but smile. The library's entrance was just ahead, and he checked his watch. On time. He stopped on the front steps. He'd been instructed to wait at the door as the building was secured by keycard. Though it had been renovated, Cade guessed the library was one of the oldest buildings on campus. He'd visited the U of M a few times over the years, but didn't know the campus well. Cade's college days were spent across the river at Hamline University, where he focused on law enforcement, playing soccer, and parties. Possibly not in that order. The student swiped his key card to open the door, and Cade briefly thought about following him inside, but an older man stepped out and glanced at him. "Are you Cade Dawkins?" "You must be," he laughed. It was the sort of laugh that encouraged other people to join him. No one else would wait outside. Come on in," he said with a wave. Inside, the two men shook hands. "I'm Darius Crocker, professor of computer science. I appreciate you coming." Cade studied the man. Early 40s black man, looked to be in good shape once, but had gone soft in the middle. Maybe a former tackle or lineman based on his build. For someone used to the dark arts of football, he had kind eyes. "To tell you the truth, I'm not sure why I'm here," Cade shrugged. "Yet, here I am." "I appreciate that. Let's head down to the lab where we can talk. I'll explain everything." Crocker led the way to an elevator. After the doors opened and both men stepped inside, the doors groaned shut. Crocker pushed the button for the basement, and the ancient elevator shuddered and lowered. Neither man said anything for an awkward moment while they rode. The piped-in music was the only sound beyond the creak of the descending elevator. Cade listened to the music and cringed. There ought to be a law. The doors opened again, and both men stepped out into what looked to be an unused sub-basement. He followed Crocker down the dimly lit hallway that closed in on them as the sideline debris of boxes and dusty furniture grew by the step. This was where discarded university furnishings came to die. "Is this where you bring all your victims?" Cade asked, genuinely curious. Crocker looked as if he was going to say something, but then pointed at him and grinned. They stopped outside a metal door, where a new-looking, dust-free security box was mounted on the adjacent wall. "You take your security seriously," Cade said as Crocker punched a code into the keypad. "You have no idea," Crocker said. "This box uses a patented algorithm on its keypad. This technology randomly reshuffles the numbers into displays on the 4-button keys after each use, making it impossible for others to access your code, no matter how many times they watched you enter it. Cade looked around. I'm thinking you don't get many people down here spying, but you never know. Crocker chuckled as he made a show of looking over his shoulder. True, you never know. It's been my experience that what usually happens is the access code is given to the wrong people. Crocker paused for a moment before pushing the door open. He looked to Cade for a reaction and wasn't disappointed. Holy shit, would you look at this place? The room was larger than expected and filled with state-of-the-art computer gear. Racks of computers and networking equipment lined the walls. The cables were entirely maroon and gold. LED lights blinked and computers hummed. A dozen workstations with multiple monitors were set up around the space, and a lone man sat at a wooden table in the middle of the room. He looked like he was born in the same decade as Crocker. That was my reaction as well, the man said as he leaned back and smiled. This looks like something NASA should be using for the next shuttle launch. Yet you're hiding this command center in the sub-basement of one of the oldest campus buildings? Cade asked. Crocker nodded. I wanted a place off the beaten path. When I asked around with the facilities people, they'd mentioned this place. It was perfect. Over the summer, I cleaned it up, hauled out a shit ton of junk. I personally ran the data lines here. I wanted it done right. Brought down the equipment piece by piece. Firewalls, intrusion detection, mass storage systems, and of course, an advanced AI machine learning system that usually actually detects interesting things. And as you saw, I secured the entrance with state-of-the-art security. It's my sanctuary. Crocker gestured to the man at the table. This is Professor Clement Tubbs, chair of the psychology department, an old friend. Tubbs, like his colleague, was a 40-something black man with a touch of gray in his hair. His eyes lit up as he smiled. I'm not that old, Tubbs said in what Cade guessed was a regular refrain between these two colleagues. There was an ease about them that spoke of friendship and shared laughter. Professor's grip was firm when they shook. Wait, are you two Crocker and Tubbs like in Miami Vice? Cade laughed. Crocker smiled and said, it was Crockett and Tubbs, but yeah, we've heard it before. That didn't stop us from being friends, though, or from working together on this. Crocker looked at his friend, his expression turning serious. Maybe I should tell you what this is. Curiosity getting the better of him, Cade leaned forward and nodded. Maybe you should. Crocker sat across from Cade, taking the chair next to Tubbs. There was an awkward pause before he spoke. Cade waited patiently. Crocker cleared his throat. I'm the chair of the computer science department here at the university. With so many hackers out there looking to cause trouble, computer security has become vital. From individuals to nation states, hackers are responsible for service disruptions, data and identity theft, trade secret poaching, and stolen secrets that compromise leaders. Many of those hacked secrets end up in one place where they are sold and traded. The dark web, Cade said. He'd heard of it, but so far had no experience with it. The dark web was something from the CSI shows and thriller movies. You got it, Crocker said. The dark web is the place to distribute and sell malware, and since computer security is vital to what we teach here, understanding what threats are out there makes a huge difference. Tubbs held up a hand. Maybe you should explain to our detective friend what the dark web is. I had no idea when you brought me into this. Good idea. I'm used to being around computer-obsessed people and forget that not everyone knows this stuff. Crocker leaned forward, his eyes alive. This was clearly his area of passion. The internet has three main parts: surface, deep, and dark web. The surface web is what we deal with daily. It's the sites that Google finds for you. But that's only 10% of the internet. The deep web is vastly larger. It houses many password-protected things like emails, databases, medical records, and bank accounts. Much of the deep web is transitory and created on the fly. Crocker paused to take a sip from his water bottle that went a golden gopher on it. And then there's the dark web. Dark web is a decentralized network of internet sites designed to make users as anonymous as possible. Communications are routed through multiple servers and encrypted at every step. Dark web is anything not accessible by standard browsers. Any information can reside on the dark web. It's only considered dark because of its more limited accessibility. Cade nodded, wondering if there was a point coming soon. Crocker continued. but most of the dark web sites are of the criminal variety. There are online markets where you can purchase darn near anything. You can find falsified documents, pot, prescription drugs, and heroin. And it gets worse from there. If you want to arrange for a murder for hire or get a rocket launcher, it's probably there. If you want something illegal, you can find it on the dark web. This is interesting, Cade said, but I'm guessing there's a connection to the dark web that prompted you to call me. He let his words hang there as he watched the two university professors. There was an exchange of glances, and Cade had that feeling again. Something was in the air. Crocker leaned forward. Yes, and we appreciate your patience while we got you up to speed. He took another sip and set the bottle back on the table, running his finger along the side. Opening a folder, Crocker slid a piece of paper across the table. But first, I need you to sign this NDA. He held out a pen. What do you think I'm going to disclose? Crocker laughed. Good try, but I can't tell you what you could disclose until you sign the paper. Cade grabbed the pen. Fine, I'm too curious to not sign it. He scribbled something that even he couldn't decipher when he looked at it. Crocker slipped the document into the folder without glancing at it. Thank you. In my research, I came upon a dark website called Orbiting Cortex. He hesitated as he looked at Cade for a reaction, but continued when he didn't get one. At first, I didn't realize that the name meant something. It felt kind of esoteric to me. Tubbs spoke up. Since this is my area, I'll explain. The name is a nod to the orbital cortex, the area believed to be involved with ethical behavior, moral decision-making, and impulse control. People with low activity in the orbital cortex are either freewheeling types or sociopaths, he said. Without the orbital cortex doing its job, you have unchecked rage, violence, eating, sex, and drinking. Serial killers have been found to have little to no orbital cortex activity. Cade leaned forward. The conversation suddenly became a lot more interesting. Crocker continued. Orbiting Cortex is a site for serial killers, made up of serial killers. Really? Crocker nodded. Really. I thought it was odd too, as the typical serial killer is more of a lone wolf. You never hear of them working together. That's why I went to visit my friend here, Clement, but he set me straight. Tubbs nodded. While serial killers typically don't work together, they are often quite social. That's why they're able to blend into society so seamlessly and can hide in plain sight. Look at the notorious BTK killer, Dennis Rader, who killed 10 victims around Wichita, Kansas. He was married with 2 children and was president of his church. Most serial killers aren't monsters who act strangely. They could be right in front of you and you'd never know. When Cade glanced at Crocker sitting in front of him, the professor held up his hands. Not me. I'm way too sweet. Ask my wife. He let out a loud belly laugh, and Cade decided he liked the man. Anyway, Crocker continued, I found the site and brought in my colleague here. The problem was getting into the message board section. As you might suspect, it was password protected, and it required us to turn on a video camera so they could see who was typing in the password. Damn, Cade rubbed his chin. What'd you do? That's where he showed his genius, Tubbs said, hooking a thumb toward Crocker. Usually he hides it remarkably well. Both professors laughed. So how did you get in? Cade asked, moving to the front of his chair. I'm guessing you got in if you called me. Crocker leaned back in his seat and crossing his arms. Yes, we got in. Remember the deep web I mentioned? It featured the site. I figured the site would have stored video clips of previous password entries. Using my considerable talent, I accessed their records and looked for a user who'd been on the site only once or twice and hadn't been back. I found one with Nevermore 27. Why didn't you hack into the site if you already could get into the records? Cade asked. Remember, this is the dark web. The access point is barricaded stronger than Fort Knox. I got Nevermore 27's password from the video clip, but I needed him too. They needed to see him enter the password. So we used that 4K monitor to project the clip, he said, pointing to a large screen. Then we aimed the webcam at it, and we were in business. Brilliant, Cade said, nodding. What did you find? Crocker took a slow, deep breath and shook his head. It was disturbing, seriously disturbing. The users shared exploits, bragged, and even challenged one another. It was disgusting stuff, the stuff of nightmares. There's something seriously wrong with these people. Well, yeah, Tubbs said, but what do I know? I'm just the chair of the largest psychology program north of Chicago. This is why we contacted you, Crocker said. We're guessing that since you stopped the blonde killer a few months back, you may have some practical knowledge about catching these killers. A vision of a blade slicing through the air. Blood. Lots of it. Not something Cade wanted to face again. The blonde killer had been a serial killer, preying on nearly identical blonde women in the Twin Cities. Cade worked the case as an investigator when the Minnesota State Patrol, when several dead women were found as one-car fatalities. When it became clear it was the work of a serial murderer, the case was handed over to the state's BCA, the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, for jurisdictional reasons. That decision hadn't sat well with the killer because he carved fraud onto the chest of the new BCA lead investigator. The governor put Cade back on the case, and his work led to the discovery that the killer was on the governor's own staff. It came down to a bloody conclusion, made worse by not all the blood being from the killer. I've caught just the one. That doesn't put me into the expert category by any stretch of the imagination. Cade paused as he studied both men. Neither said anything. Are you wanting me to travel around the country looking for these killers? That feels more like a federal case, to be honest. As interesting as this is, I don't think it involves me. He stood up, already thinking about the long drive back home to Stillwater. Glances were exchanged between the university professors. There was clearly more to the story than they'd let on so far. Cade's frustration threatened to overcome his good manners, but he held it in check. It doesn't involve me, does it? There was that feeling again. Crocker cleared his throat. Actually, it does. After you caught the blonde killer, there was significant discussion on the orbiting cortex site. They were incredibly intrigued by the cat and mouse game that went on between you and the killer. Though there was a consensus that the blonde killer wasn't as intelligent as he thought he was, they considered you a worthy opponent. A chill ran down Cade's back. He didn't think it was from the air conditioning. Tubbs leaned forward, concern written on his face. Remember we said the killers challenged each other on the site? Cade nodded. Goosebumps joined the shivers, and he sat back down. A new challenge was issued, Tubbs said. A challenge that poked the beehive and got them all buzzing. He paused. Damn it, Tubbs. What was the challenge? Staring directly into Cade's eyes, Tubbs said, the challenge was to come to Minnesota, kill here, and outsmart the man who caught the blonde killer. We don't know if it means a single killer or several, but we knew we had to warn you. But it might be none, too. However, if they do come, Crocker said evenly, they're coming for you.